everyone, and today we are going to do the ball poem written by John Berryman from class 10th book, First Flight. It's a beautiful poem which talks about losing something in life and then growing up, accepting the loss and moving on. This poem was written by the poet John Berryman. So this poem for him is very symbolic, where this ball relates to his beloved father whom he had lost. And this poem in general teaches everyone of us that there are times, there are situations when we lose our beloved, when we lose a person, or we lose a favorite thing in our life. But we got to stand up and face the situation. This poem basically has got two kinds of meanings. One is the literal meaning and the other is metaphorical meaning. So before reading an explanation, I will be attaching this one small section in this video where I will explain both the meanings in general. So make sure that you watch that section. So as we start this session, let me tell you that I'll be reading and explaining this poem to you, followed by a stanza-wise summary. Though this poem does not have stanzas, but I'll take 4 lines at a time and summarize it. After which we will discuss the poetic devices, then the question answers as usual. And let's begin by knowing something about John Berryman before we read this poem. John Allen McAlpin Berryman, also known as John Allen Smith Jr., was born on 25th October 1914 in Oklahoma. He was an American poet and scholar. He was a major figure in American poetry in the second half of the 20th century. His best known work is The Dream Songs, written in 1969, which was a series of 385 poems, for which he received National Book Award for Poetry and Pulitzer Prize for Poetry. Later, he also received Bullingen Prize for his work. He died on 7 January 1972 in Minneapolis, US. Before we begin with the reading and explanation, let me talk about the 2 different interpretations of this poem. There are 2 ways in which you can understand this. One way is the literal way and the other is a metaphorical way. Let's first look at the literal way of understanding it. The ball is lost. Now this ball was the boy's favorite ball. The loss of ball can also be taken as the loss of a loved person or a loved thing in your life. So in this kind of interpretation, the poet is trying to tell us that just as the boy lost his ball, each one of us also lose a person, a thing, or some money in our life. And that kind of loss is an emotional loss for us. Even if the boy was given money or another ball, it could not have replaced the old one. So in this kind of interpretation, the poet wants to tell that the boy had lost his childhood and he had also lost his innocence, because that incident told him the harsh reality of life. That incident made him grow up and face the harsh situations which even we adults do not want to face at times. The second kind of interpretation of this poem is metaphoric interpretation. Now here, the ball can be termed as the young stage of life. The ball bounces down the street, which can be equated to the active and energetic life of humans when that person is in childhood. Now when this ball went into the water, it can be understood that the childhood stage was past, it was completed, and now the boy has become older than before. And as he sees the boy into the water, he can understand that his younger days, his childhood days are now over, and now he has stepped into an older stage of life where he has to undergo certain harsh realities of life, where he has to understand and accept the loss of something or the loss of people. And yet he has to move on in his life. So these are the 2 interpretations of this poem. I hope you understood. Do not get confused, because when I'll explain the poem to you, I will take its literal sense more than the metaphorical sense. Let's start with the session and let me read the poem to you. What is the boy now who has lost his ball? What, what is he to do? I saw it go merrily bouncing down the street, and then merrily over. There it is in the water. No use to say, oh, there are other balls. An ultimate shaking grief fixes the boy. As he stands rigid, trembling, staring down all his young days into the harbor where his ball went. I would not intrude on him. A dime, another ball is worthless. Now he senses first responsibility in a world of possessions. People will take balls. Balls will be lost always, little boy, and no one buys a ball back. Money is external. He's learning, well behind his desperate eyes. The epistemology of loss, how to stand up, knowing what every man must one day know, and most know many days, how to stand up. What is the boy now who has lost his ball? What, what is he to do? I saw it go. The poet is talking about a boy who has lost his ball. He wants to know about him, about the boy, and his reaction because he has lost his favorite ball, the very loved possession that he had since his childhood. Now, the phrase, what is the boy now, means how is the boy now feeling. So, the poet here wants to know how the boy is feeling after he has lost his ball and what will he do next. I saw it go. Here, I is the poet and it is the ball. The poet here claims that he saw the ball go. And now, where did it go? Merrily bouncing down the street and then merrily over. There it is in the water. Now, the poet here says that the ball merrily bounced means happily jumped. Bouncing means jumping up and down, and the word bouncing is used for ball, the movement of the ball. So the ball was as if it was cheerfully jumping up and down the street. It bounced down the street and then ultimately it went into the water. Now, what has happened? The ball has gone into the water. The boy is now sad. He's just standing. He doesn't know what to do. The poet has been watching this entire incident and he is keen on seeing the reaction of this boy. No use to say, oh, there are other balls. An ultimate shaking grief fixes the boy. The poet says that it is of no use that the boy can be convinced in some or the other way. It is of no use telling the boy that there are so many other balls. He can play with those balls happily. Why should he cry over this particular ball which has gone down into the water? But it is of no use because the poet also knows how closely the boy was connected to this ball. Because this ball belonged from his childhood days. It was as if he had lost the childhood moments which he had cherished, which he wanted to keep with him. Or we can also say that this ball can be a symbol of his loved person whom he has lost. So if we have lost a person or a thing in our life, it is difficult to get that person or that thing back. However many more things we may buy with money, but we cannot get that particular thing back. And that is why it is of no use saying that there are so many other things like this particular thing. An ultimate shaking grief fixes the boy. Now this boy is so sad that because of the grief, because of the sorrow, he is fixed to one position. He stands there motionless. As he stands rigid, trembling, staring down all his young days into the harbor. When this ball went into the water, the boy became very sad. And as a result, he stood there rigid. Rigid means completely like a statue, motionless, trembling, staring down. Trembling means he was shaking with fear and he was staring down at that ball. But it was not just a ball for him, it was his young days. It was his childhood days because he can associate his childhood memories with that ball. He must have played with that ball for quite a long time, for many years in his childhood. Now it is lost. So he can see that in the shape of the ball, he has also lost his childhood. And now that ball has gone into harbor. Harbor is a place where the ships are parked, or it is also called as a dock. So where the ships are anchored there. So the ball went flowing into the water and the boy kept standing there seeing his young days lost. I would not intrude on him. By this line, the poet means that he does not want to interfere in this situation. He does not want to talk to the boy at this moment in time because he wants the boy to learn his own lessons. He wants the boy to control himself without anyone else's help. So the poet here does not interfere in the situation and he leaves the boy as it is, who was in pain, who was feeling sorrow and sad because of his loss. A dime, another ball is worthless. Now he senses first responsibility. The poet says that a dime is money, which is 10 cents in US to be precise, and another ball. So even if the poet gives him some money or he brings a new ball for him, both are worthless. They are unimportant because neither money nor a new ball can fill up the gap which this old ball had brought into his life. Anything would be unimportant at this point of time because this boy wanted his old ball back. Now he senses first responsibility that now was the time after he lost his ball. That was the time he sensed that he has learned his first responsibility. And what was that first responsibility? It was a lesson. It was a lesson that he had to pick up himself. He had to control his sadness, his grief, come out of that sadness and face that challenge, face the situation. In a world of possessions. Now, in this world, which is so materialistic, where you feel that people are only living for wealth, money, and all materialistic things, there are no emotions, there is no love. So, in such a world of possession or in such a materialistic world, he has learned his first responsibility, and that is to face his sadness himself. People will take balls. Balls will be lost always, little boy. The poet here wants to tell to this boy that people or this world will always take away your favorite things, your favorite person. In your entire life, you will keep losing your favorite things. They will be lost always, like he has lost his ball right now. And no one buys a ball back. Money is external. And then comes a point when you want to have that person back, you want to have that thing back in your life, and any amount of money cannot bring back that person or lost thing. So you may have a lot of money because money is external. Money comes and goes, it flows. And even if you're very wealthy, even if you have a lot of money with you, you still cannot get what has already gone. You may buy a new one, but you cannot buy the old one again. Similarly, you may have gone through the childhood days. You cannot get it back. Even if you are rich enough and could buy anything in this world. To this boy, this ball was very precious. It could not be equated with any amount of money, and therefore, a new ball could never replace the old ball which he has lost. He is learning, well behind his desperate eyes, the epistemology of loss, how to stand up. The poet here says that now this boy is learning. He is learning his first lesson. And what was his first lesson? We discussed in the last few lines also. The lesson of standing up after being hit by grief and sorrow. The lesson of accepting the loss. And he is learning this well behind his desperate eyes. His eyes are very desperate, they are full of sadness. With those feelings in his eyes, he is trying to learn his first lesson. And the first lesson is epistemology of loss. Epistemology of loss means he now understands what it means to lose something. This is the first thing in his life which he has lost. He had never lost anything earlier. So this is the first time he is dealing with some kind of loss in his life. And now he is learning how to stand up. That is how to face that loss and become bold and brave. Knowing what every man must one day know, and most know many days how to stand up. This means that the boy is trying to learn the real truth of life, which states that you have to accept the miseries of life and stand up again. This is the truth which everyone has to learn in his life. Every man must know one day that he has to stand up. Whether it is single time or whether it is multiple times or many days, everyone has to know to face the sadness in their life. Everyone has to accept the loss in his or her life and face every challenge boldly. He has to learn to move on. Let's start with the summary now. In this poem, the poet is describing about a boy who has lost his ball. He was there to see this entire incident. And the poet is thinking now, what is the boy feeling after he has lost his ball? What will he do next? Because the poet had seen the ball rolling down the street into the water. And now he's waiting for the boy's reaction. The poet knows that there is no use of convincing the boy that there are other balls also in this world. Because the ball that he has lost was connected with his childhood. He had a lot of childhood memories with that ball, and now that the ball is lost, he feels as if he has lost his young days as well. So the boy stands there rigid, stiff, motionless. He was trembling and he was just staring at the ball as the ball moved towards the harbor in the water. But the poet decides that he will not intrude. He will not step up in this situation and tell the boy what he should do next, because the poet wanted the boy to learn his own lesson. He wanted the boy to learn that he has to overcome the grief himself and accept the situation the way it is and carry on with his life. The boy is very emotionally attached to this ball, and no kind of money or another new ball can fill up the void which this lost ball has created in the boy's life. This world of possessions, by that the poet means that this world is completely materialistic. The world runs after power, it runs after money, it runs after the material things. But somewhere this world is also emotionless. Nobody would understand the emotions behind the loss of this ball, but everyone would try to give or offer him a new ball or money. But that all is very unimportant, that is worthless for this boy. And now, when he was standing there, after he has lost his ball, he realizes his first lesson or his first sense of responsibility, because that was the first time when he had lost something in life. He's learning well behind his sad eyes, behind his sad feelings. He's learning one thing or one harsh reality of life, that he has to accept the loss. The knowledge of accepting the loss of something is called epistemology of loss, and that is what he is learning. So, in this world, every man has to know, has to accept the miseries of life, the sadness of life, the loss of someone's beloved person or thing. On the contrary, every man also should know how to stand up, how to face the situation, how to accept the loss. Instead of grieving on it, one has to move on, because life goes on with or without anyone or anything. First poetic device that we come across in this poem is anaphora. Anaphora is the repetition of the first word in consecutive lines. If you look at the first two lines of the poem, you will see the word what is repeated. And if you look at the third and the fourth line of the poem, you will see the word merrily is repeated. So these lines are an examples of anaphora. The next poetic device is repetition, wherein a word is repeated in a single line. Now, there are two examples of repetition in this poem. In the second line, we can see the word what is repeated in the same line. And in another line, the word balls is repeated. So this shows us repetition. Let's now talk about alliteration. Alliteration is the repetition of initial consonant sounds in two consecutive words. The examples of alliteration in this poem are buys a ball back, where b sound is repeated, man must, m sound is repeated, most, no, many, here also m sound is repeated. The next poetic device is imagery. This poetic device is used to create a picture with words in a reader's mind. The examples of imagery are merrily bouncing down the street, he stands rigid, trembling, staring down, his desperate eyes. These sentences definitely create an image in our mind when we read the poem. Last but not the least, the most important poetic device used here is symbolism. It is a device that uses symbols, be they words, people, marks, locations, or abstract ideas, to represent something beyond the literal meaning or beyond the meaning of the words that are written in the poem. The ball here symbolizes the boy's childhood and innocence. Therefore, loss of his ball indicates loss of his precious childhood days and innocence. As far as the rhyme scheme is concerned, this poem is a free verse, which means there is no rhyme scheme, but still the poet conveys his meaning through the rhythm, the tone, and his use of words. The title of the poem has a very deep and symbolic meaning, as we have been discussing since the starting or the beginning of the session. Yes, this title is very appropriate because this talks about the lesson that the boy learns after losing his ball. So in a way, this ball is symbolic of his childhood, of his innocence, of the loved ones that we lose in our life. And this ball itself teaches him how to stand up, how to move on, and how to face the situation bravely. Talking about the moral of the story, we come to understand that we must realize the importance of people and possessions in our life. It is only when we lose them, we understand what we have lost. And we know that once we have lost that person or thing, we cannot get it back. But life goes on. It doesn't stop for anyone. And that is what you have to take from this poem. So this poem gives us a very strong message that the loss of something is not the end of your life. You got to stand up. You got to move on. You got to pick up your senses and just face the truth and move on with your life. I know that the emotional attachment that you have with your loved one or with that particular favorite thing doesn't go by, but you can keep it as a cherished memory in your heart. And remember that life is very crucial for each one of us. We cannot spend it crying or mourning over our loss. Instead, we have to just move forward with it. That's all in this session I have, and I'll come up with a new topic in my next video. Till then, take good care of yourself. Don't forget to watch the question answers and summary in written form that I'm just going to flash in front of you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.